This weekend, thousands of small and medium businesses were hit with a ransomware attack. We're here in the first week of July 2021, and if those organizations had a SIEM, they might have been alerted to the risk that they were facing, the malicious activity on their network, before significant damage happened. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy. I'm a vice president at ARG, and while I work for ARG, this video is my own and doesn't necessarily reflect the views of my employer. As far as an overview, we're going to look at why you want to implement a SIEM, what a common definition of a SIEM is, and then what's been happening over the last couple of years to change that common definition of a SIEM to update it to what a SIEM really means today. We're going to take a look at the event sources that you need to be prepared to ingest into your SIEM. We'll look at the threats that are detected by a SIEM and get an idea of what type of data visualization you can expect. And then we'll talk about what you need to think about before you purchase a SIEM. Let's get going. So first of all, why a SIEM? So most organizations have really strong perimeter defenses. They've got their firewall, they've got their endpoint protection, they have their IPS and IDS and so forth. The perimeter is strong. But many small and medium organizations have not prepared for the inevitable event that something gets past that perimeter. How will you know if you have a breach? A lot of companies, the way they discover that something's been breached and they actually have an active event on their network is people start complaining that's way too late. So a SIEM helps us understand when something is happening on our network and alerts us as an early warning system. Alerts happen in real time, and that really helps us minimize the potential damage. The dwell time of malware is one of the things that we really want to try to avoid in managing our security posture. We understand things will happen, but if we can catch them early, we can minimize the damage, isolate it, and create a remediation plan without disrupting the larger organization. Another great thing about a SIEM is it helps us with our reporting, not only compliance reporting, but executive dashboard reporting. Helps communicate the success of the security operations organization to the rest of the company. Now, there are a couple of reasons why you may not want a SIEM. First of all, traditionally they've been very complicated, and I don't know that they've actually become simpler over time, but there are ways of simplifying your deployment of a SIEM we'll talk about in just a little bit. They have been expensive over time, not so much anymore. There are new market entrants that have really created strong value propositions for a SIEM. And lastly, SIEMs have been exhausting. When alerts come in, and a very small fraction are actionable, people get tired of managing the alerts, investigating the alerts, and they stop paying close attention to them. It's called alert exhaustion, and that just creates a backlog of alerts, and the SIEM isn't doing its job, isn't adding the value to the organization that it should be. Again, those have been addressed recently, and we'll talk about how. So first of all, what is a SIEM? Well, SIEM, SIEM, stands for Security, Information, and Event Management. It's essentially a log aggregation and correlation platform. It ingests logs from various network and application sources. It normalizes those logs so it can process it. That process includes correlating, comparing log events one to another against a known set of rules or signatures that identify malicious activity. Now, the key here is known signatures of malicious activity. One of the biggest limitations of SIEMs today is that they're not great at identifying zero-day events. And with the polymorphous aspect of malware today, understanding or identifying zero-day events is critical. But SIEMs have been working on addressing that. The other thing SIEMs do is they can evaluate those logs against predefined rules. So maybe they may not be looking for event signatures, but if you want to establish predefined rules within the SIEM that you want to be alerted on, SIEMs are very good at doing that. The new development within SIEMs is the User and Entity Behavioral Analysis, UEBA for short. It is the ability to establish profiles within the SIEM platform and identify deviations from those profiles or deviations from the normal activity of those users and entities. Now, when a SIEM sees something that appears suspicious, it's going to create a case. In that case is assigned a risk score. And as the SIEM develops and builds more information about the case, that risk score may change. It may determine that initially suspicious activity may be perfectly valid based upon additional activities that it sees in and around that event. Or it may increase the risk score if it sees additional suspicious activity happening. If the risk score gets high enough and it crosses the threshold that you've established within your SIEM, it will generate an alert. And that alert will go to either your managed service provider or someone in your organization. And there's typically a library that's associated with these alerts that help those security engineers troubleshoot and, first of all, validate that there is in fact something malicious happening on your network, and then troubleshoot that malicious event. Now, I've already talked to some of these recent developments. I tend to get ahead of myself on the slides, but SIEMs have been merging with another category, a category that's typically referred to as threat detection. That's an artificial intelligence and machine learning category that does create these profiles of users and endpoints within your network or other devices within your network, and then determines whether or not activity within those endpoints or entities are staying consistent with those profiles or are deviating from the expected behavior. When those deviations happen, a case is created and that risk score is evaluated. Now, the AI machine learning elements of SIEMs today have two core capabilities. One is to identify those zero-day events, something that is happening that does not have a known risk signature in a threat intelligence database that the SIEM might rely on for its traditional signature capabilities. And it also helps you reduce false positives, because it can take that signature, for example, that has identified as potential malicious activity and compare it to other information that's available within its platform and determine whether or not that's a false positive or there's additional risk elements that create a higher level of concern for that event. There's also an element of SIEM that is a little bit of vaporware that's getting some traction in the marketplace, but from what we've seen is really not available, so I want to caution you on that. That's the Security Operations Automation and Response, or SOAR. That's the ability of a SIEM to direct activities to other parts of your security, other components of your security posture, and possibly take an action. Let's say that there is a data flow to a suspicious IP address. You can have the SIEM, in theory, communicate with either your IPS system or your firewall and potentially, or your router, and potentially shut down that flow of traffic. That is available generally within individual manufacturer platforms, and it's becoming, and when I say available, it's still pretty immature. It's really not available across manufacturer platforms. So that is something that is on the roadmap for many of these manufacturers, but it's really not available today. So be careful and be cautious about any claims of security operations automation. Now, the other great thing about SIEM development is they're beginning to integrate with many of the common SaaS applications. So not only can you monitor the activity on your network and on your endpoints, but you can also now monitor the activity on many of the SaaS applications that your organization is leveraging, which just expands the value proposition of your SIEM. Speaking of sources for your SIEM, some common sources include infrastructure equipment. Here we're mostly concerned with, for example, changes in configurations that don't appear to be authorized. Obviously, your security devices will feed their security event logs into the SIEM. You might also include a couple different server categories, like your application servers or your web servers. Certainly your authentication servers would want to be part of your SIEM log ingestion strategy. You also want to include your storage arrays and your endpoints. So pretty much anything that is an operating element within your network can be ingested, or the logs, operational logs from those platforms can be ingested into the SIEM and contribute to your overall security posture review that the SIEM is performing for you. In terms of the threats that SIEMs are great at detecting, Some of the top threats include unauthorized access. So your SIEM, one of the rules that you establish in your SIEM might be, if I have a user who hasn't logged in for 3 months, and all of a sudden I get 10 failed attempts to log in, and on the 11th attempt it's successful, I might want to create a case for that. It may not be at the level of an alert yet. We want to see what else happens within that access event. But that's a case I want to create, and I want to monitor the activity of that inconsistent user of our network. It's also good at identifying malware. If someone puts something on your network, that is an event that can be identified, and again, a case created and a risk score associated with it. Ransomware. So within your storage network, if the SIEM starts seeing a lot of files having name changes, or the amount of storage being utilized by your storage array is increasing dramatically very quickly, and that's unusual activity, those are the types of things that SIEMs can alert on. When a ransomware organization is launching their attack, they're going to copy all of these files and encrypt them as they're copying them. It takes up a lot more storage space when that happens, something that the SIEM can identify and create an early warning for you. DDoS attacks, insider attacks, and hijacking are other typical threats that a SIEM can identify for your organization. Now, one of the great things about a SIEM is that it aggregates all this information, and you can establish an executive dashboard for your security operations team, and even for some of the other folks within the organization. And these dashboards can be customized by user type. And so data visualization and the ability to create different data elements and different reports within the SIEM, it will be one of your critical evaluation criteria when you're looking at different alternatives. Now, lastly, again, we're talking about a little bit of what you want to consider before you purchase. As I mentioned, SIEMs have evolved considerably over the last couple of years. In fact, SIEMs used to be pretty consistent in what they do. There's actually been a lot of divergence and a lot of differentiators that have been introduced in various SIEM platforms. So you have a lot more to consider, a lot more to evaluate than you have had in the past. I mentioned that it's incorporating threat detection, the ability for artificial intelligence and machine learning components to really help the platform evaluate threat vectors. Be cautious about any SIEM that you're evaluating. They have a lot of nuances, and you want to really understand first what your strategy is, and then find the SIEM that fits your strategy. You don't want to start to discuss your SIEM alternatives with potential vendors and allow them to define your strategy for you. Typically, you're going to misfire, and you're going to be disappointed with the results that you get. We advise clients to look at those AI and machine learning capabilities critically. And the reason why you want to look at them critically is the traditional SIEM developers or manufacturers were really good at identifying signature-based threats. The artificial intelligence and machine learning aspect that they're attempting to add is really a very different technology, and some of the platforms are having more success developing that technology, acquiring that technology, and integrating that technology into their SIEM platforms than others. So you really want to understand what capabilities those user and entity behavior analytics will provide to your organization. You're going to want a clear understanding again of what you want to accomplish, and find the right SIEM to accomplish your goals and objectives. Know what sources you're going to use. We just talked about the common sources that you're going to use within a SIEM, but you want to specifically know what platforms you are going to want to have the SIEM ingest. And I say that because not all SIEMs will accept log flows from all platforms. So you want to specifically enumerate your sources to your potential vendor and ensure that they have parsers or scripts that can ingest these logs automatically into their platform. What are your alert requirements? What type of individual alerts or rules do you want to establish within the SIEM, and how will you go about doing that? Will you do it on your own, or will you have a managed service provider help you configure those rules and those correlations? And lastly, as we mentioned before, be skeptical of any automation claim. While I think that will be prevalent in the future, so you want to look at a SIEM that has automation strategies in place, and it's on their roadmap. I don't know that you can really, with good confidence here in July 2021, bank on automation being available in any SIEM that you acquire over, let's say, the next 6 months. It is coming, but it's not there yet. So here's a quick look at our portfolio. If you are looking at any of these platforms or want to discuss any of these platforms, please feel free to give me a shout. My contact information is in the description of this video. Happy to have a conversation about anything that you're considering. And if you got some value out of this video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you want to find your way back here in the future, the best way of doing that is just by clicking that subscribe button. That will put us in your feed, and you'll be able to find your way back here in the future. And with that, I appreciate your time in watching this video, and I hope you have a great day.